that night changed everything. Now every shadow holds their sinister secrets. In 2018, I experienced a divorce that left me with virtually nothing. I relocated to a small home, but it was empty. I lacked furniture, appliances, everything, really. The task of furnishing my place seemed daunting, particularly from a financial standpoint. So I saw this as an opportunity to find discounted items on Craigslist. My main focus was on big-ticket items like a couch and a TV. Finding deals didn't prove difficult. I reached out to a few sellers and made some purchases. During this process, I came across a listing for a TV stand posted for $40. It looked like a typical wooden TV stand. The seller, Matt, however, had specific conditions for pickup. He insisted it had to be after 9 on weekdays due to his work schedule, ruling out weekends entirely. While this arrangement still suited me, I found his strictness somewhat peculiar. I assumed this specificity was why the item hadn't been sold yet. I agreed to pick up the TV stand on a Wednesday at 9:30 p.m. On the appointed day, I confirmed with Matt and received his address. The town he lived in was unfamiliar to me, only mentioned in passing conversations. Soon I understood why. Most of the homes were dilapidated, with aging infrastructure. Even the streetlights were mostly non-functional. Pulling up to Matt's house didn't ease my unease. It matched the rundown appearance of the surrounding homes, illuminated only by a dim hallway light. I counted out $40 and tucked the bills into my pocket before stepping out of my car and onto his porch. As I waited for him to answer the doorbell, I glanced around his yard. It was cluttered with various items, garden statues, eclectic decorations scattered about. The porch itself was adorned with knickknacks and oddities. Then he opened the door. Matt was a tall and skinnier-looking man, probably in his 40s. I observed. He wore a tired expression, as if he hadn't slept in days. As he welcomed me inside, I could smell booze on his breath. If I'd known beforehand that this was who I'd be buying from, I never even would have come here, I thought, but it was too late for that now. As we walked down the hall, stuff was scattered all around the house. It wasn't like a hoarder's home you'd see on TV, but more like an abandoned house that had been trashed by random teenagers. When we reached the living room in the back of the house, he pointed at the TV stand. The room was barely lit, making it hard to see the condition it was in. "Any chance you could turn on the light for me?" I asked politely. Matt didn't respond, but walked over to the wall and flicked on a small lamp in the corner. It was around this time that I got a really weird feeling that something was wrong. And before I even got to look at the TV stand, I heard someone else behind me. Another man had come around the corner, standing next to Matt. He didn't say hello or anything, just watched me. I was really unsure what to make of this and didn't want to overreact right away, but I was also getting really uncomfortable as that eerie feeling only grew larger. I was standing there trying to think of what to say or do, but then Matt walked past me and stood in front of the TV stand. They were now on either side of me, facing me and not speaking. Several long seconds passed as nobody spoke or moved. Before I quickly walked past the other guy and down the hallway toward the front door, I made a hasty exit. As I left, I heard them laughing in the room behind me, like this was funny, and as I got halfway to my car, the front doors slammed shut. I can't even find any reasons for what occurred that night or what those two guys were trying to do. Maybe it was just some sick joke they were pulling, trying to get me to freak out, or maybe it was something more sinister. I don't plan on finding out, though.
I am a man in my 30s hailing from a small town, and I have a chilling tale to share about my encounter with the unpredictable world of Craigslist. It all started when I decided to sell my US television set on the website. The TV was nothing extraordinary, just a modest entertainment center, but I thought it might catch someone's interest. Little did I know that the simple act would spiral into a horrifying ordeal that still sends shivers down my spine. The first sign of life from the other side of the screen was a message from a woman who seemed quite keen on the entertainment center. "Hi there. I saw your TV listing. Is it still available?" she messaged. We exchanged a few messages, and soon enough, we had arranged a time for her to come over and inspect the item. The plan seemed straightforward enough. We agreed on 7 o'clock, and I made sure everything was ready for her visit. As the clock neared 7, I waited with anticipation. But as the minutes ticked by, there was no sign of her. Confused, I decided to text her to see if she was still planning to come. After what felt like an eternity, I finally received a response just when I was about to call it a night. "So sorry. Can I still come over?" she apologized. Being a night owl, I thought, why not? Let's give it a shot, even though it was already 10 p.m. As you can imagine, the 10 minutes she said she would take to get there turned into 20. I began to question whether I was wasting my time when another text message arrived. "Just pulling up now," she messaged. My curiosity overcame me, even though she said she was just pulling up. A mixture of anticipation and caution filled me as I made my way to the front door. My heart skipped a beat as I approached the door. Not only was the woman there in my driveway, but her car also had 4 or 5 additional occupants. "Who are they?" I asked, feeling a knot in my stomach. "They all want to see the entertainment center," the woman explained in a casual manner. "I don't know about you, but having a bunch of strangers break into my house wasn't in the plan." I firmly informed her that only she could enter to check out the TV. I wasn't even sure I wanted her to enter my home at that point. "I'm sorry, but I can't allow everyone in," I stated firmly. Despite her insistence, she might understand, so I told her no. I was surprised to see the woman lose her composure and become angry at my choice. "This is ridiculous. You're not being very accommodating," she snapped. She had the goal to accuse me of not living up to my Christian obligations. Let me tell you, putting myself in danger wasn't part of being a good Christian. As you might imagine, I locked all the doors because I was uneasy and went inside my house for protection. With my heart racing, I couldn't help but glance out the window. One of the guys who was with her made the odd decision to relieve himself at the end of my driveway, which made things even more bizarre. It looked like a scene from a horror film throughout. They eventually got back in the car, and with a screech of tires, they all drove off into the night. I couldn't believe it. It was like a nightmare had abruptly ended when I considered what might have occurred if I had allowed them inside. I couldn't help but shudder. I learned a valuable lesson about using Craigslist to transact with strangers after that terrifying incident. I made sure to exercise extra caution and follow my gut instincts going forward. Simply put, you can never be sure who is lurking in the online world shadows on the other side of that screen. Therefore, keep my story in mind. If you ever find yourself selling something on Craigslist, be wary, establish boundaries, and resist pressure to jeopardize your safety. After all, it's preferable to be branded a bad Christian than to experience a real-life horror story. I was born and raised in a small town, a place where everyone knew everyone else, and life was simple and predictable. However, life had other plans for me, and I found myself moving to the big city, a place teeming with life, noise, and endless possibilities. The transition was not easy, and I had to make several adjustments to fit into my new environment. One of these adjustments involved selling my car, a reliable 6-year-old Honda Accord that had been my faithful companion through many adventures. The decision to sell my car was not an easy one. It was more than just a vehicle. It was a symbol of my past life, a life that was quickly fading into the background as I embraced the hustle and bustle of city life. However, I realized that owning a car in the city was more of a burden than a convenience. With public transportation readily available and parking spaces hard to come by, I decided to let go of my beloved car. I posted an ad on Craigslist hoping to find a buyer who would appreciate my car as much as I did. Soon, I was contacted by a man named Mark. "Hello, I'm Mark. I saw your ad about the car. Is it still available?" he asked over the phone. He was in his early 40s and seemed like a decent person. He told me that he was interested in buying the car for his daughter, who was about to start college. We had a few phone conversations, and everything seemed to be going well. When Mark came for the test drive, he was friendly and showed genuine interest in the car. He inspected every nook and cranny, asked questions, and seemed satisfied with the car's condition. We negotiated the price, and after some back and forth, we agreed on a fair amount. Mark asked me to hold the car for him for 2 days while he arranged for the payment, and I agreed. 2 days later, we met again in a familiar neighborhood. Mark was as friendly as before, and everything seemed to be going according to plan. We took the car for one last test drive, and then it was time for the payment. Mark handed me a cashier's check from Chase Bank. I suggest we go to the bank together to cash the check and transfer the title I suggested. But Mark's demeanor suddenly changed. He became hesitant and seemed nervous. We were parked by the side of the street, discussing the bank visit, when Mark asked to inspect the car one more time. I agreed, and as we both stepped out of the car, Mark suddenly jumped back into the driver's seat and sped off, leaving me standing on the sidewalk shocked and confused. Panic surged through me as I watched my car disappear down the street. I turned to the bystanders pleading for someone to call 911. A kind stranger dialed the emergency number, and I quickly explained the situation to the dispatcher. As I was talking, a police car pulled up nearby, and I flagged them down. I got into the back of the police car and gave them all the information I could remember about my car and the man who had stolen it. The officers reassured me that they would do everything they could to find my car, but unfortunately, the thief managed to get away. In the following weeks, I had to deal with the aftermath of the theft. I filed a police report, contacted my insurance company, and tried to come to terms with the loss of my car. I was frustrated and angry with myself for letting my guard down and allowing this to happen. 3 months later, just as I was about to receive compensation from my insurance company, I received a call from the police. They had found my car 3 states away. It turned out that Mark had been part of a car theft ring. He had stolen my car and sold it to another man who had then sold it to an unsuspecting buyer. The police arranged for all of us to meet at the station. The man who had bought my car from the thief agreed to return the car to me, and the thief agreed to refund the money to the buyer. In the end, I did receive compensation for my car, but the whole ordeal left me feeling stressed and demoralized. Despite this experience, I continued to buy and sell cars on Craigslist. However, I learned a valuable lesson from this incident. Now, I always make sure to take a photo of the buyer's driver's license at the beginning of every meeting. This experience taught me the importance of being cautious and vigilant, especially when dealing with strangers.
It was May of last year and I had just signed a lease on a new house. It turns out the refrigerator was not the subject of a deal. I will spend most of my money on the house. So I started looking for a cheap one at garage sales. I haven't found any way this way. Therefore, I miss Craigslist. After only 10 minutes, a person appeared not far from me. I called the number and a nice woman answered. She said the refrigerator was still for sale, but she couldn't guarantee it would still be there when I arrived. So against my better judgment, I asked him about PayPal and sent him $75. She sent me an email confirming that she had received the money, and we set a date for me to pick it up. That Saturday, I texted him to let him know I was on my way. The house was a beautiful ranch-style house probably built in the 80s. I knocked on the door, and this hot girl with brown hair and a very short haircut answered. After choosing field work, I asked her about Sunny, and she said it was her and took me inside. I have no reason to worry. Just like the outside, the house is well finished and smells clean. We chatted for a few minutes until a tall guy, at least 6'5", covered in tattoos, appeared from the kitchen. She introduced me as John, her boyfriend, and told me he was going to take me to the refrigerator. She disappeared behind the house, and I never saw her again. John led me through the kitchen to the garage door. He opened the door and pointed to the refrigerator. He was in front of me, almost sitting against the high door. I could barely see it because the garage was so dark. I asked him if he had a light, but he said it was broken and they hadn't had a chance to fix it. It's not serious. He had to open the high door so I couldn't get out. Anyway, I asked him to pick it up, but he said it was also broken. He apologized. I was just about to present it to the House of Commons. This upsets me, but I have no other choice. Right now. There was a bit of light coming from inside the house. It must have done that. I took 2, maybe 3 steps into the garage before realizing there was plastic on the floor. I looked down and saw it covering the entire floor. That's when I started to worry. I don't see any reason why I should be there, except that I would stop walking. John's shadow began to get closer. Then in the left corner I heard shuffling. Everything in me speaks of leaving. Suddenly I turned around and quickly went back to open the door. I was surprised that John was so close to me, but I continued. I snuck up to him and said, I left the stroller in the truck and I'll be right back. Not far away there was a cart leaning against the wall. He pointed at it and was about to say something, but I didn't stop. When I was sure he was no longer behind me, I ran the rest of the way to my truck door. I jumped in and out of there. I don't know what happened after that. I received a few messages from Dawn, but posted them without reading them. When I got home, I logged on to Craigslist to report them. I was shocked to see that the list was gone. I looked around for another 30 minutes to make sure they deleted it immediately. I also called the police and reported it. They seemed a bit skeptical about my request but promised to check. I never heard from them again and I didn't care. I'm alive, and that's enough for me. For the $75, I have no chance of asking for a refund, and it's not worth getting involved with these monsters anymore. Since then I haven't gone there anymore. The whole system seems dangerous to me these days. Anyway, a week later I got lucky and a thrift store in my neighborhood had a used refrigerator. It cost $100, but it's much nicer than this one, and it serves its purpose very well. And in conclusion, I don't want to mislead people. I don't think Craigslist is dangerous, and it's free. Thousands of people collect their belongings every day without any problems. But after what happened to me, I don't think it's worth it. However, if you find anything on the site, just be careful. Bring a friend when picking them up if you can meet in a public place during the day. But more importantly, use your head, and the situation may seem fuzzy and could be the difference between life and death. This happened quite a while back when I was 18 years old. I lived with my folks, even though I had recently moved on from secondary school. I just purchased another PC. Furthermore, after I was finished getting it set up, I posted my old one on Craigslist. It was just 2 years old. Yet in those days that implied it was obsolete. It was a Dell PC with fair specs, and it was very nearly $2,000 fresh out of the box. I was asking for just $500 because more current workstations at the time were significantly better. After posting it on the web, I didn't need to wait long for a reaction. A person named Toby informed me I was inspired by the PC, but I needed to see it first. I needed to set up a chance to meet next week when I would be in Midtown. That way we could meet at a bistro or something like that. At the point when I proposed it, Toby said that he wanted it immediately. Therefore, I consented to allow him to approach my home. I realized gathering in a public place would be more brilliant. Be that as it may, our home was in suburbia, and I didn't have a vehicle. I realized it was apathetic and moronic. Yet I gave him my residence. My folks weren't home, and I figured it'd be a speedy deal and that nothing would turn out badly. Toby appeared sometime thereafter, on a Saturday at around 7 p.m. I saw a more seasoned van maneuver into the carport, and a man got out. In any case, he was in good company. He had one more person with him. The two of them were no less than 30, a lot greater than me. When that's what I saw, I felt somewhat frightened. Something about their presence felt off. In any case, I forgot about the inclination. All things considered, they were only there to check a PC out. I let them in, and we set up in the kitchen. I started showing the PC to Toby, and afterward, his companion promptly requested that I utilize the restroom. I pointed him to the correct heading, which was not far off and down a short passage. Then, at that point, I zeroed in on showing the PC to Toby. Around 10 minutes passed while we were checking it out. I had deleted it in advance, so it was fundamentally running as new. Then, at that point, I unexpectedly understood that the other man hadn't gotten back from the washroom. "Hello, he's your companion." "Good," I asked Toby. "No doubt, you can take some time some of the time, just relax." He consoled me. I tuned in as intently as I could and heard strides that weren't coming from the washroom region. They were coming from higher up. Since there were only the three of us in the house, I realized it was him. The restroom was on the fundamental floor, so there was not a great explanation for him to be up there. That was the point at which I began to overreact inside. However, I attempted to conceal it. I nonchalantly got some information about his companion once more, trusting my anxiety wasn't appearing. His reaction was cold and frightening. He put his hand on my shoulder, not in a well-disposed way, but rather with a ton of strain. He told me not to stress over it. His grasp was fixed agonizingly. Furthermore, at that time I realized this was something other than a deal that turned out badly. We were being ransacked. That was most likely the arrangement all along. Alarm set in that I attempted to keep my poise. I advised Toby to take anything they desired and simply go. However, he didn't give up. His grasp on my shoulder felt hard. It resembled danger. What's more, I began to shake. I realized I needed to move quickly. I figured out how to split away in arbitrarily my father's office on the primary floor, locking the entryway behind me. I left my telephone on the kitchen table, which was a dumb slip-up. Fortunately, however, there was a landline in the workplace where I was, so that saved me. My heart was beating as I dialed 911, making sense of the circumstances for the dispatcher. The man is trusting that the police will show up on the longest day of his life. I could hear the two men stepping around the house, most likely taking anything they might find. They probably realized the police were on their way since they took off in no time and cleaned out the front window as they returned to the van on the carport and dashed away. At the point when I was certain they were gone, I emerged to see what was taken. The main things I saw missing on the fundamental floor were the little television in the kitchen and the PC that I was selling. Notwithstanding, I later figured out that a large portion of my mother's gems were taken, as well as no less than $200 in real money. The police appeared around 10 minutes after the burglars left. They remained for some time. However, at that point they left without making any commitments. He was unacceptable. That was the last I heard from the police about what occurred. I contacted them a few times, yet they never hit me up. At the point when my folks and sister returned home, I needed to make sense of what occurred. They generally thought I was kidding from the outset since I have a dull, funny bone. Yet, when they figured out it was genuine, they were distraught as well. I would gauge the misfortunes at around $3,000, which was a tremendous amount of cash for me at that point. Since it was all my issue, I needed to take care of it. That was essentially my entire summer of work down the channel. It was the last time I met an unusual individual off the web. If I was ever to rehash it, there'd be no chance I would allow them to come to my place. It's a public or private arrangement with no exemptions.
I used to frequently purchase iPhones, video game systems, TVs, and many other items on Facebook Marketplace, then resell them on Craigslist and Facebook Marketplace to make a profit. I've been doing this for years as a side job, and I've learned a lot along the way. Hello, I'm Mark. I saw your ad about the car. Is it still available? I usually try to resell iPhones because they seem to have the highest profit margin. On one occasion, I got an iPhone X for $155. This was over a year ago, so it was a very good deal. You'd be surprised how low the prices you can negotiate from these people if you try. Most people might reject such ridiculous offers, but many just want quick cash, and they'll sell it to the first person who contacts them. So I took full advantage of it. Anyway, I had listed that iPhone X for sale at $300, and I wrote in the description that I would consider best offers. Usually this phone sells quickly, so I wasn't too worried about rejecting offers less than $300 because most of the time I could sell it within a week at the original price if I just waited. Just an hour after I posted the listing, someone contacted me who was interested in the phone. Hi, I'm interested in the iPhone. Can we meet tomorrow? They asked a few questions and planned to meet the next day in the late afternoon after they got off work. A few hours before the meeting, they messaged me and asked if I could come directly to their house instead of meeting at Walmart like we had planned before. I was immediately wary of that request, but I still asked them for their address so I could put it into the GPS app on my phone to see how far it was. They were only about 20 minutes away, which wasn't too far actually, and they were willing to pay the full $300 for the phone. So I decided to go for it. I told them I could deliver the phone to their house, and that was fine. I just told them to let me know what time I should come. They thanked me excessively and kept telling me how I was a lifesaver and how grateful they were to me for helping them. They then asked if I could come at 7:30 p.m. and they would definitely be home by then. I agreed, but I didn't like that they wanted to meet so late. I had to get up for work the next morning at 5 a.m. and I like to have some alone time at home and get some time to myself before I have to sleep. When they initially said we could meet after they got off work, they said late afternoon. So I expected it to be between 4:30 to 6 p.m., maybe at the latest, but I still went along with it because I really wanted to sell the phone. This woman didn't live in a neighborhood. She lived on a street off the main road in town. She definitely had neighbors, but the area had a somewhat rural feel to it. Around 7:20 p.m., I left because I wanted to make sure she would be there when I arrived. I told her when I was on my way and that I would arrive in about 20 minutes. When I arrived and knocked on the door, my anxiety tripled, waiting for an answer. It was starting to get dark, so that didn't help much. When the woman opened the door, she introduced herself as Sabrina. She invited me in and introduced me to her husband, who was sitting on the couch in the living room. Almost immediately, they started mocking me, making fun of my clothes and appearance, and even tried to pass it off as a joke. But I sensed strong passive aggression almost immediately after I walked in. I had a strange feeling about these people. There was something very wrong about them. I thought Sabrina might be on drugs because she was acting weird. And she looked like someone who was using something. And I'm not talking about weed. I'm talking about serious hard drugs. Her eyes looked sunken, and she was pale as a corpse. She was definitely on something. Trust me. She just wasn't acting right. Not like a normal person. Anyway, she was rude and somewhat pushy while I was there and argued with her husband about how much she was willing to pay for the phone. I let them look at the phone. Sabrina wanted to put her SIM card into the phone before buying it because she wanted to make sure the phone would work. She then started complaining about a small crack on the phone, even though I stated in the description that there was a small crack, and it was fully visible in the photos I took. She started getting upset and said that I was trying to scam her. She said she wouldn't pay more than $200 for it. I immediately said no and asked for the phone back, constantly trying to negotiate, and I said that I wouldn't accept less than $250. I made it very clear that I wouldn't accept anything less than that. Not liking that at all, she took her SIM card back from the phone and literally threw it towards me. And I mean, she really threw it at me like really hard. The phone hit me directly in the face and then fell to the floor after bouncing from my head to the hardwood floor. "What's wrong with you?" I asked. Then she ran off somewhere. I think it was her bedroom. I started screaming and crying hysterically. Her husband tried to calm me down and gave me $100 so I wouldn't call the police. I accepted the $100 and I didn't call. One day, I was browsing Craigslist out of sheer boredom. I wasn't looking for anything specific, and at that time I didn't even know that people used Craigslist for dating or meeting new people and making friends or anything like that. But after doing some research, I found out that it definitely exists. I was very bored and quite lonely, so I started looking through the listings. There was a guy named Tom who was very handsome. He said he was 32 years old. I myself was 34 years old at the time, so we were around the same age. I wasn't looking for anything specific. I'm a very laid-back person, so I usually just go with the flow of whatever happens. He had a good aura and seemed like a genuine person, and he also wasn't too pushy, so I wasn't too worried about the scam situation. He was clearly attractive though, and I liked everything about his profile, so I gave him a chance. "Hi, I'm Tom. Nice to meet you. We started talking, and eventually, he got my phone number. We talked for a few days through text messages, and calls. This also turned out to be positive, because he lived less than 10 minutes from where I lived. He asked if I wanted to go out that weekend to the nearest bar on Saturday. I said yes, and we continued to talk. Everything progressed quickly, and we very quickly moved from friendly conversation to very flirtatious conversation. On our first date at the bar, when we met on Saturday, everything went well. We talked casually, got a bit drunk, had good food, and I had a lot of fun. I definitely liked this guy, and I had feelings for him. Then, towards the end of the night, just before we were about to part ways, I got a message from a random number saying, and I quote, "Stay away from my man. You better not be there with him when I get there." I was very confused. I showed him the message I received. He dismissed it as if it were irrelevant, and he didn't know what or who it was. Then he became very awkward and started acting suspicious, like he wanted to leave right away. Just before we were about to part ways, his girlfriend showed up. "Yes," I said, his girlfriend. He had a girlfriend this whole time. I was quite angry, and I had been drinking, so I didn't hold back from this woman at all. She started screaming at him and calling me various names and saying rude things to me. I started shouting back at her, and I guess she didn't like it because she actually took off her shoe and threw it in my direction. Then she started attacking me with her bag and hitting me, pulling my hair, and beating me up badly. "What are you doing with my man, you homewrecker?" I tried to defend myself by grabbing her hair, but before I could, I fell to the ground and hit my head on the concrete. I had to go to the hospital because I was almost unconscious. That night was a big mistake. I still can't believe I was ever in that situation in the first place. I'm a very calm, friendly, and polite person, so the whole thing was very out of character for me, if you will. I didn't even know how she found out about us, or even how she knew we were at the bar together. I'm glad she found out before I got too involved with this guy, and got more heartache than I already got. She eventually got arrested that night and charged with assault. I walked away without any charges or time in jail at all. I just went away with a severe concussion, and a big reminder of why I'll never meet random strangers from the internet again. I now have a fiancé, and we've been together for over 5 years, and we're getting married next year. We plan to start a family soon, and I've never been happier. This is just one of the stories I like to tell when warning people about the dangers of the internet and meeting unknown strangers. You never know what someone's true intentions could be. Things could have been much worse for me that night.
It was around this time last year when I decided to use Craigslist as a means to sell a few things I had to get rid of. My house was getting cluttered and I planned to get some new furniture, and with winter right around the corner, I wanted to get these things out fast. The main piece I was selling were these 2 lounge chairs in my living room. They were really big and a bit outdated, but still fully functional and didn't have any stains or rips on them. It only took about half a day for a few responses to come in, but 2 of the 3 gave me lowball offers, so there was really only one guy who was serious about buying them. He wanted to take a look at them after work that day, sometime around 6 or 6:30 I thought. I of course agreed, just happy to get them out quickly. Now usually I'd try to meet up somewhere public, but honestly I didn't have a way to transport the chairs, and even if I did, I don't think I could lift them myself anyway, I reasoned, so I sent him my address. Come 6 o'clock, I turned on the front porch light and opened up the curtains on the windows, then sat in the living room on my phone while I waited for them to show up. I remembered. Probably 20 minutes passed before a truck pulled into my driveway. They took a few minutes before getting out and walking up to the door. I said hi and let him in, I recalled. He was an average-looking man, late 20s or early 30s, wearing typical work clothes. His name was Matt, and he started up some small talk, telling me about why he was excited about getting the chairs and everything. The guy seemed really nice, and I felt relieved that this would be quick and easy, I thought. We walked around the chair and sat in it and seemed to enjoy it. We talked about price, and he was good to give me what I listed it for, but just as we were about to exchange cash, we both heard a car door slam shut. It sounded like it was right in the driveway where he'd parked his truck, I realized. Matt quickly went outside to check on it, and I just watched, not really sure what was going on. I looked through the window and there were no other cars out there, so someone had to have been messing with his truck. A minute later, Matt came in clearly angry and said someone stole a bunch of stuff out of his car, I recalled. I could tell that he was not so trusting of me, like he thought I had something to do with it. I obviously didn't, and I said that, but he was right to be skeptical, and I was also right to be skeptical of him. I still didn't know if this was some kind of setup, but before anything could be worked out, we heard footsteps quickly approaching the front door. I remembered. We turned and looked over, seeing a guy in a hood push the door open and step inside my house. His eyes were bloodshot and he looked nothing short of insane. He stared at us, standing just a few feet away, looking like he was in a complete state of rage, I recalled. The guy was young though, only a kid, maybe 18 or 19 years old, but still dangerous nonetheless. Both Matt and I stood still, trying to not provoke anything to happen. But then Matt started telling the kid to take it easy. He held his hands up and took a step closer, but the kid was quick to pull the weapon out of his pocket and aim it right at him, I recounted. Yes, it could have been fake, but there was no way to tell, and from the way the kid was acting, I really don't think it was. He yelled at Matt to walk out the door, and now in shock he did as he said. The kid then followed him out of the house and held him at gunpoint the whole way to the truck, I continued. I watched in terror as he pulled out and drove away, obviously outside of Matt's will. As soon as they were gone, I called 911, then ran to my car and tried to follow them while describing what was going on to the operator, but they were gone. I couldn't find any sign of them, I admitted. The police ran an investigation, using the information I had to quickly identify who Matt was and his truck's license plate. Over the next couple days, I was just waiting for a call, but that call never came. Both Matt and his truck still have never turned up, I sighed. I feel guilty, like I should have done more, but everything was so risky, and I likely could have lost my life as well. And even in those final moments of the interaction, I didn't know for sure if Matt was in on it as some sort of elaborate plan. I don't know what that kid wanted, or why any of it happened. It's been almost a full year though, and I don't think it's likely that anything more will be known, I concluded. For the past few days, I've been alone at home, just me in an empty apartment. A little while ago, my boyfriend got offered a really good job in another state. We've been wanting to move out of Florida for a long time. So when he got the job, we packed up and left town, even though we had already paid rent for a whole month in our old apartment. I didn't get to say bye to some really close friends, I thought to myself. Since we'd already paid the rent for the month, I decided to return by myself and spend a couple more weeks here. Luckily, my job gives me the flexibility to work remotely or from the office in Florida. So even though the apartment feels empty without my boyfriend, I still have a good place to work and keep me busy. When I said the apartment was empty, it wasn't totally true, I admitted. I had a big piece of furniture that I chose to sell instead of taking with us. So I put it up for sale on Craigslist. But here's where things took a weird turn. I put my address on the post, but it didn't stay up for long. Thankfully, the furniture sold on the same day, which was nice. Since I posted the ad yesterday, some strange stuff has been going on. At first, it didn't seem too weird. But you see, I have a cat, so I'm used to hearing noises all the time. Most of the time, it's just him being his mischievous self. He enjoys knocking things over either for fun or to annoy me. One evening, while I was lying on my air mattress, reading my favorite book, I heard a lot of noise coming from the kitchen. Is it just him being noisy again, I wondered. Shrugging it off, I went back to reading, assuming it was just the cat causing a ruckus. Then I remembered, wait, my cat isn't even here. We took him to our new place. So I awkwardly rolled off the air mattress, trying to be as quiet as possible. I went to the kitchen to see what was making the noise, and there I found a few red Solo cups that had been on the counter, now scattered on the floor. I looked around and the only thing I could think of was that the fan was on and it blew them off. That's what I convinced myself to believe so I could sleep, I muttered to myself. But the truth is, those cups had been on the counter all day, and the fan had been running for hours. Why did they suddenly fall now? I tried not to think about it too much. I turned off the lights, read a bit more on my Kindle, and eventually fell asleep. I woke up around 3 a.m. to a strange noise I recounted. It sounded like someone was shaking a jar of coins or a set of keys, I'd never heard anything like it before. It seemed like it was coming from outside the apartment, but it was really loud. As soon as I got out of bed, the noise stopped. I turned on all the lights in the house, but I couldn't find where the noise was coming from. So I went back to bed with all the lights still on. It felt safer with the lights on, and I fell asleep quickly. When I woke up this morning, I continued. I didn't notice until I turned on the bathroom light that all the lights in the house were off. No one has ever said I sleepwalk, I pondered, but I couldn't think of any other reason why all the lights were off. The front door is locked with a deadbolt and a regular bolt, I reassured myself. After I showered and dressed, I looked for my keys but couldn't find them in my purse. I thought maybe I accidentally put them in the freezer with the groceries or left them on the kitchen counter, I speculated. But I checked everywhere and they weren't there. I looked in the freezer, microwave, counters, but my keys were nowhere to be found. Then I remembered the jingling sound I heard during the night, I recalled. I checked outside even though it was unlikely for my keys to be there. The only way they could have ended up outside is if they fell out of my bag when I came into the house, I reasoned. I stepped outside and there were my keys on the welcome mat outside my front door, covered in something red. That's when I realized I might have messed up by putting my address on Craigslist for that ad, I admitted. I'll see what happens tonight, but I'll be honest, I confessed. I'm starting to think I might leave early and not stay here for the rest of the rent. I use various websites like Craigslist for the same reasons everyone else does. You can find expensive items at significantly discounted prices, or even just cheap things for even cheaper. I don't have a ton of money, and using these sites is sometimes essential when it comes to getting things like furniture that's usually really expensive to buy anywhere else. This happened when I was looking around for a dining room table. Ours was really old, and my whole family used it as a place to eat and as a workspace, so it's been through a lot over the years. I went around on Facebook Marketplace and OfferUp, but neither had anything good. Most of them were still expensive, and even when I tried to bargain with a few of the sellers, none of them would budge. So then I went to Craigslist. Around here, I think most people use other sites nowadays, but Craigslist still always had the cheapest deals, though they were still somewhat rare to find. But almost as soon as I opened up the site and hit enter on the search bar, a really good listing showed up. It was a very basic wooden dining table that didn't have much wear on it, and the seller posted it for only $100. Compared to the $400, $500 everyone else was listing things for, this was a steal. I sent a message saying I'd love to check it out and would be willing to pay the full price. He didn't reply immediately, so I just took a break and hung out with my kids until around 7 when they went to their rooms to get ready for bed. I went back to my laptop and found a response from just a couple minutes ago. It was a very quick few sentences saying he was sorry but the table was going to be thrown out tomorrow morning, but if I really wanted it, I'd have to come by tonight or any time before 5 a.m. tomorrow. It was weird that he'd be willing to sell it at any time during the night, and his reasoning didn't make all that much sense to me. But after some thought, I replied back saying I could pick it up right now. I didn't want to go there really late into the night or super early in the morning, but it was only 7, so I didn't see a problem if I was able to go right now. The man replied quickly, agreeing and sending the address. It was only 10 minutes from my place, so I let my wife know what was going on and where I'd be, then headed out. From context clues, you probably already know that I don't live in a lavish area, so when I say the seller's house was really worn down, I mean it was really worn down. It was small like the others in our area, but the yard was full of trash and random other things, was surrounded by a thin chain link fence. I parked on the side and opened the fence, walking through the yard and up to the door, which was already open. I could hear some people talking and laughing. I peeked inside and gave a light knock on the door. Right away, a man came around the corner and invited me in. He looked like he was in late college, somewhere in his mid-20s. As I stepped inside, though, I couldn't help but notice how disgusting the whole place was. There were beer cans laying around and stains in the carpet. It looked like a really poorly taken care of house where they had probably hosted hundreds of college parties. The man was very laid back, though, casually walking me down the hallway and into the kitchen while talking about how he didn't have room for the table anymore. When we got to the kitchen, there were 2 other men, looking about the same age and standing against the wall, seemingly in the middle of a conversation. Next to them was the table. Somehow it looked almost untouched. I didn't know how that was possible considering the rest of the house. I walked around it and checked to see if it was stable and whatnot, but as I did, the house suddenly went quiet. The 2 talking had stopped and the man selling the table didn't speak either. I looked up, seeing them all staring at me. Did I do something? I asked, looking around at each of them. When my eyes fell on one of the men closest to me, though, I noticed that his pupils were massive, something that only being drugged up could achieve. But what he was on, I didn't know. Regardless, in that moment, I knew this wasn't right. Not only was this getting strange, but I didn't want to buy a table that's been in this kind of house and used by these sorts of people. I think I'm going to pass on it. Thank you, though, I said softly. I started walking toward the hallway, but one of them stepped in front of me. He didn't say anything, he just stood there, blocking the way out. Something about the way they were all looking and acting. I could tell that whatever this was planned out, and they likely never meant to sell the table. My face fell to fear, as the anticipation of just standing there, surrounded by these strangers, began to overwhelm me. But then one of them stepped over and whispered something in the other's ear, and they moved aside, still not saying anything. I cautiously walked between them, hurrying down the hallway and out the door. A lot of things went through my head on the drive home. I knew that they were planning something horrible, but what that was and why they ended up letting me go, I'm not so sure of. When I got home, I told my wife, who convinced me to call the police and report it, but they couldn't do anything without anything having happened. So whatever those men were planning, I'll probably never know. I just hope someone else doesn't have to find out. I wanted to move out of my old apartment in a few months and was hoping to get some money to help pay for movers. The shoes were nothing special, but I listed them for generous prices, hoping to get them bought quickly. It was some guy whose email had the name John K in it, and he offered just $5 less than my listing price. It seemed like an unnecessary adjustment to the original price, but I didn't want to keep waiting for more offers, so I wrote him back saying I was okay with that. We set up to meet the following day at 5, in the parking lot of a public gas station in the middle of town. The next day I sent a text and he confirmed that he was on his way, so I left as well and got to the gas station right at 5. They weren't there yet, but there was a lot of traffic on the road, so I figured he'd be late. I sat in my car patiently, and over the course of 30 minutes, the roads cleared up and the sun started coming down, and then John finally pulled in. He drove a small sedan with none of the headlights working and resembling something from a scrapyard. He parked next to me and got out. John looked like he was in his 30s and was a pretty large guy, wearing ripped-up clothes and having long, unkempt hair. He didn't say much, so I brought out the shoes and let him look at them. As he held them, though, and didn't say anything, he kept looking back at the gas station. I don't know what he was looking at, I thought, but after he checked over his shoulder multiple times, I glanced over as well. The gas station was empty aside from one guy putting gas in his car, but otherwise I didn't know what he could be looking at. John was taking his time, though, pointlessly looking over everything multiple times, as if they were some really rare shoes that he was going to drop hundreds on. But these were just some regular sneakers, nothing fancy or rare. Then John looked over his shoulder one more time, just as the car by the pump started to drive away, and all of a sudden, his whole demeanor changed. He stopped looking at the shoes and looked at me. "What else do you have?" he asked abruptly. I looked at him confused. "Those are the only shoes I brought. I didn't know you were interested in others." His eyes went cold as he stepped past me and put his hand on my car door, trying to open it. "It was locked," I explained. John immediately looked at me and told me to unlock it. His voice was deep and strict, like it was a threat if I didn't. I kind of just stared at him and tried to wrap my head around this, thinking of what the best course of action would be, but in the moment, there's just no time to really think through options. I unlocked the door, knowing at most all he could take was a couple random bills I had in the front, but then he said something that I was not expecting at all. "Get in." He opened the passenger door and told me again. I stood there, even more taken aback, but now starting to get way more worried about where this was going. I looked behind me, hoping someone else was here, but the gas station was empty. No people or cars anywhere in sight. John grabbed my arm and pulled me over to the door, taking the keys from me and aggressively shoving me into the car while throwing a few punches landing on the right side of my face. I immediately tried to get up, but John slammed the door against my head, making my vision go blurry and everything just sort of fading in and out. I heard him start walking around the car as if he was going to the driver's side, but then he suddenly turned around and sprinted back to his truck. I was still out of it and barely remember anything else, but I guess someone pulled in at the perfect time and confronted John, scaring him away. If they hadn't have helped me and John was able to get in and presumably drive away, I don't know what would have happened. Assuming his car was either stolen or untraceable to his name, then stealing my car and abducting me would have left no trace of our interaction, giving him days, if not weeks, to do whatever it was he planned before anyone would even come looking.